Wicked is a story that portrays the concepts of propaganda and systemic oppression so effectively because it deconstructs a story that almost everyone is likely to be familiar with. It's all about presenting the idea that The Wizard of Oz doesn't objectively show what happened. Gregory Maguire's 1995 novel, Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, carries the tagline, "In this classic tale of good and evil, what if we weren't told the whole story?" The Wizard of Oz is one of the most famous stories of the 20th century, and the version that people are most likely to be familiar with is the 1939 film adaptation. The takeaway from this story is that Dorothy and her companions are the heroes. The wizard was simply a well-intentioned man who unwittingly gained power, and the Wicked Witch of the West was undeniably the villain. Wicked presents the idea that perhaps morality isn't so black and white, following Elphaba from birth to her iconic death as the Wicked Witch of the West. It deconstructs and recontextualizes a story that just about everyone knows, and in spite of its fantastical setting, it presents a strikingly true-to-life story of propaganda and systemic oppression. In 2003, Maguire's original novel was adapted into a Broadway musical, which was subsequently adapted into a set of two films released in 2024 and 2025 respectively. My main area of focus will be the first film, which covers Act 1 of the musical. One of the key ways in which the film communicates its themes in its script and mise-en-scène is through intertextuality, a postmodern concept where texts construct meaning by reusing the iconography and meanings of another text. Julia Kristeva refers to text as a mosaic of quotations. Any text is the absorption and transformation of another. Wicked utilizes intertextuality in order to call back to iconic elements from The Wizard of Oz, making sure that the audience is always aware of how things will end for Elphaba, as a direct result of the propaganda that's weaponized against her. The very first shot of the film shows her iconic hat resting on a puddle of water, signifying that she's died. Many characters who are close to her in the beginning will have turned against her or otherwise been lost by the end, all to some extent as a result of the propaganda. Glinda, of course, is established right away as the hero and supposed enemy of the Wicked Witch that she's known as in the original story. Elphaba's sister Nessa Rose is always shown wearing striped socks, and she's gifted a pair of silver slippers in a box lined with red sequins. These elements all come together to indicate that Nessa will eventually become the Wicked Witch of the East, whose death is a part of the disruption of equilibrium in the iconic story. Finally, two of Elphaba's fellow students, Fiyero and Boq, go on to become the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman respectively, both due to Elphaba's spells, and this is hinted at from the moment each character is introduced. Through dialogue,
Life's more painless for the brainless.
I cry a lot.
and posing. The two are also heavily associated throughout the film with brain and heart imagery respectively, as the Scarecrow famously wished to have a brain, and the Tin Man wished to have a heart. Moments of intertextuality are littered throughout the film. In one scene, Glinda picks out a pair of sparkling red shoes and taps their heels together before handing them over to Elphaba, in a clear reference to the ruby slippers from the 1939 film, and how Glinda eventually passes them on to Dorothy and incurs the wrath of the Wicked Witch, reminding the audience that though they're close now, they will eventually turn on one another. There are also intertextual references to and subversions of the typical conventions of musical theatre. For example, in her 2008 article Defying Gravity, Queer Conventions in the Musical Wicked, Stacey Wolf compares the duet What Is This Feeling to the song People Will Say We're in Love from Oklahoma, stating that both songs are a duet between two characters who are currently refusing to admit that they have romantic feelings towards one another. This is significant because it's one of many indicators of queer subtext between the two female leads, implying that in becoming the Wicked Witch of the West, Elphaba lost not just a friend, but a lover. It also establishes both characters as queer women, and Elphaba's defiance versus Glinda's compliance can be seen as a metaphor for Elphaba refusing to hide her authentic self, and being demonized as a result, while Glinda performs hyperfemininity and enters a relationship with a man who she only cares for on a superficial level.
You're perfect.
You're perfect.
So we're perfect together.
Fundamentally, Elphaba and Glinda's relationship is what's at the centre of this story, and this is shown by the constant presence of the complementary colours pink and green, representing the two girls respectively. Then, when the two of them get on a train to go to the Emerald City, there's only green, signifying that by the end of this trip, Elphaba will be by herself, without Glinda. The final scene of Act 1 of the musical, and therefore the final scene of the film, is the musical number Defying Gravity, which spiritually serves as something of a coming out scene for Elphaba as she refuses to back down on her beliefs and her identity. Furthermore, the book's equivalent of this plot point is the most outward display of queerness in the entire novel. She put her face against Glinda's and kissed her. "Hold out, if you can," she murmured, and kissed her again. "Hold out, my sweet." And this moment is alluded to in the song itself.
Kiss me good, I'm defying gravity.
Beyond intertextuality, there are other instances of foreshadowing and symbolism throughout the film. From the beginning, it's established that Elphaba is the product of infidelity. Her mother is seen having an affair with an anonymous man. Later on, when Elphaba meets the wizard, the musical number A Sentimental Man has him sing about how he never had any children of his own, but he feels inexplicably fatherly towards Elphaba.
I am a sentimental man who always longed to be a father. And helping you with your assent allows me to feel so parental.
Towards the end of the story, it's revealed that he was her biological father. And it's highlighted how he always wished to be a father, but ended up abusing his power to unknowingly cause the death of his only daughter. In another scene, Elphaba explains to Glinda that her father, or at least the man she thinks is her father, blames her for her mother's death and Nessa's disability. This reflects the later development that Nessa will in turn grow to resent her for indirectly causing the death of their father, as he dies from a heart attack when he hears the news of what she did, or rather, what she's blamed for. One of the key themes of the story is the idea that public perception is all that really matters, and with the right level of influence, a leader can convince the public that anything is true. Media news people, frequently operating with complete integrity and goodwill, are able to convince themselves that they choose and interpret the news objectively. In other words, the restrictions and regulations that are put on news media make it extremely easy to influence public opinion by controlling not only what information is communicated, but the perspective that it's told from. This idea of controlling information and silencing dissidents is portrayed in Wicked through the animals losing their ability to speak, and the first ones who are targeted being ones who inherently have a platform, such as educators and religious leaders. This control of information and perspective also makes it easy to spread misinformation, which is shown when the film reaches its climax. The wizard lies and deceives Elphaba by telling her that one of his guards, a non-verbal monkey, wishes he were able to fly, and he convinces her to perform a spell to give him wings. She performs the spell, and unbeknownst to her, it causes all of the monkeys to grow wings, and the wizard reveals that he intends to have them serve as spies to keep the other animals in line. When Elphaba refuses to be complicit in this plan, the wizard turns on her, and his press secretary, Madame Morrible, announces to the public that Elphaba is evil and disfigured these monkeys out of sheer malice. This whole point about public perception is summed up in the song Popular.
Celebrated heads of state or especially great communicators. Did they have brains or knowledge?
Well, actually,
Don't make me laugh. They were
popular.
right. It's all about popular.
Lyrically and narratively, this song parallels the Act 2 number, Wonderful, which is sung to Elphaba by the wizard, as he tells her essentially the same thing that Glinda tells her here. From the beginning, the audience are shown just how pervasive propaganda is in Oz. The first scene shows Glinda arriving in a village to announce that the Wicked Witch has died, and there are propaganda posters everywhere. The Munchkins are shown taking down posters that depict the Wicked Witch in an overly exaggerated caricature that is clearly intended to make her look as scary as possible. This is a common propaganda technique used in everything from political cartoons to online posts. In one shot, a message is visible on the side of a water tank reading, "Water will melt her." By the end of the musical, this is revealed to be untrue, but this misinformation is taken as truth and displayed publicly. The following scene is a flashback to Elphaba's childhood, and she's shown reading a children's picture book about the supposed story of how the wizard arrived in Oz and saved the day when the people were in need. This story is shown to be instilled in people from a young age, and it's constantly retold. As seen in the One Short Day number when the girls watch a play that reenacts the same story. Historically, one of the main ways of instilling an idea or opinion in society has been to teach it to children from a young age. In the song The Wizard and I, Elphaba states,
And all of us has to love you when by the wizard you're acclaimed.
specifically using the words has to, essentially asserting that if the wizard likes or dislikes someone, then the people of Oz must feel the same way. This is shown to be the case later when he publicly condemns her, and she becomes widely feared. This idea is furthered throughout the film, and it's exemplified by Glinda and how her feelings towards Elphaba evolve. When she and Elphaba first meet, they don't get along, and because of Glinda's disdain towards her, Elphaba is ostracised by the other students, and this is possibly best illustrated in the scene where all of the students mock Elphaba and laugh at her dancing, but as soon as Glinda joins her, they all join in. This is a smaller scale version of what happens later when the wizard condemns her. It's a person in a position of influence in a certain community, be it the university or the land of Oz as a whole, stating an opinion about a person and the rest of the community following that opinion. On top of propaganda, the concept of systemic oppression is shown to be present from the beginning. Systemic oppression is defined as a form of oppression perpetuated by governments or other institutions. This in turn often influences individuals against whatever group is being targeted. This in particular is exemplified by this scene. The students are in a history lecture where the professor, Dr. Dillamond, explains the institutional discrimination that animals face in Oz, and Elphaba explains the concept of a scapegoat. In times of struggle, people look for someone to blame. Dr. Dillamond explains that he has been discouraged from discussing this topic, which mirrors real-world examples of educators being discouraged or outright banned from discussing topics such as racism and LGBTQ issues. The board is turned over and displays this message, with the implication being that someone within the university, either a student or another lecturer, has been motivated to commit a hate crime by the widespread anti-animal sentiment. This hierarchy is established early on as Elphaba's family are shown to be wealthy and have animals as servants, and it's later established that animals are losing their ability to speak. When Dr. Dillamond is detained and removed from his job, he becomes more animalistic. This is a representation of how marginalised people are dehumanised in order to justify systemic oppression. The scene continues, and the new professor unveils a caged lion cub, who is noticeably nervous, hinting towards the fact that he grows up to be the cowardly lion, claiming that it's for his own good. Parallels can be drawn between this and the way that systemic oppression in real life historically has been, and is to this day justified with the claim that it's for the good of the affected group, such as Americans arguing against the abolition of slavery due to claiming that the enslaved people wouldn't know what to do with freedom, or the idea that healthcare for transgender youth must be restricted on the grounds that young trans people, particularly those assigned female at birth, essentially don't have the mental capacity to be able to consent to medical transition. On a more personal level, we see how Elphaba as a character who both literally and thematically represents people of colour, is aware all her life of how she's treated differently because of an intrinsic trait. She's antagonised by a group of other children, then reprimanded by her father for responding with anger. This is a scenario that will be familiar to members of any marginalised group, but particularly women of colour, especially black women, are most often profiled in this way. This iteration of the character specifically is coded as a black woman. Actress Cynthia Erivo stated that she requested for Elphaba to have her hair styled in micro braids rather than the standard straight hair texture that the character usually has, in order to provide, in her words, a direct connection between her as a black woman and Elphaba as a green lady. Beyond being explicitly written as a queer woman of colour, Elphaba as a character functionally exists as a stand-in for any and all marginalised groups. Wicked ends more or less in the same way as The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy and her companions, who we now know were all connected to Elphaba at some point, show up to the Wicked Witch's castle and throw a bucket of water over her in order to kill her. And it's also worth mentioning that in The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy accidentally throws a bucket of water over the Wicked Witch, attempting to put out a fire. But in Wicked, it's pretty clear cut that it's deliberate, and it almost makes it come off as if the version of events being shown in The Wizard of Oz is deliberately constructed to make Dorothy look like she's in the right. And while the musical adaptation specifically reveals that Elphaba simply faked her death, the fact remains that Dorothy and her companions, minus the Scarecrow because it's also revealed that Fiyero helped her to orchestrate faking her death, were driven to attempting to kill her by all of the propaganda and misinformation that had them convinced she was a wicked witch. Even though she saved their lives, the lion was freed from captivity by Elphaba, but has been convinced by others that this is the reason for his lack of courage.
And the lion also has a grievance to repay. If she let him fight his own battles when he was young, he wouldn't be a coward today!
And the Tin Man is operating under the pretense that she put him through this transformation for no reason other than to cause him harm, unaware that she performed the spell in order to save his life after a series of mishaps.
It's due to her I'm made of tin, her spell made this occur. So for once I'm glad I'm heartless, I'll be heartless killing her!
The two of them have been surrounded with so much propaganda designed to convince them that she's evil and must be stopped. And she's been dehumanized to the extent that these people who were once her companions are driven to kill her, and Elphaba herself is driven to fake her own death and go into hiding just to escape the persecution she faces as a result of her defiance. Oftentimes, one of the main aims of systemic oppression is to eliminate those seen as undesirable from public life, and within the story this is achieved when Elphaba ultimately decides to go into hiding, allowing the public to think that she has died.